I zoom back to the user story. Beginning of the life cycle, that user story is, as we saw yesterday, very simple. A user is going to do something that's supposed to give an outcome. That's our description. And this is how we're going to check that it's done. It's the beginning of a conversation. That user story can be enriched while you work what it leaves with the Kanban. It's okay. You can add and refine acceptance criteria. The only thing is we consider that it's good enough to start when we have just enough detail, or we think we can figure out the details on the way, and we will enrich the user story with that. Now, where do I put my tasks? Now that we know what we try to achieve, then we start to think, okay, what do we need to do to get that story done? You can see that already we have when the story is on design, we know what to do. We're on the design phase, we're on the development phase, we're on the validation phase. So we already have some place where we don't really need to describe the task. Sometimes you need a little bit more because it just helps your team. And this is what I say, like, there's many ways to describe the tasks that are needed to make something happen. There are different variants that I'm going to give you. I have one recommendation that I've seen working better, but the baseline I would say is nobody cares about the task beside you, and the tasks are not important. Nobody with an Agile project will ask you whether you have Git on your machine or whether the CI is okay. It is not an outcome that we care about. It's the quality for sure. It's the definition of done, but nobody cares. And what I mean by that is if you can find a user story and make it happen. I'm looking back at something that we mentioned yesterday. We need to have on the machine, we need to have Git, we need to have some modules installed, and maybe you need to have an account and you need to have some SSH key uploaded to the server and whatever. Like, yeah, but if you can make the story finished without that, then it's good. Then we kind of don't care without violating your definition of done. That's why we created. But ultimately, we're only looking at what we're trying to achieve. The implementation tasks are just action to get there. And it's up to you. Just know that nobody cares. Besides you as a team, because you want it to be done, outside of your project, nobody cares. It's a gross line, but that's really the spirit we're trying to get into. Sometimes you see a user story and it's obvious. You just talk about it because you're a team, you're dedicated to your project. So you're, hey, how we do this? Well, I don't know. I guess I'll update the database and I'll tell you, we'll look at the API together. Okay, I'll code the interface. All right, good enough. We talk tomorrow. Everybody's coding. And you guys, I mean, you're in the same virtual room. You have a Slack, you chat, you do what you do. Sometimes, though, it's going to be helpful for you. You may want to have some of these tasks fleshed out just to clarify your mind. You want to put it out. You can use different systems. Yes, well, I'm going to give you all. In some flavors of Agile, some people put something that they just call task in the product backlog, even though I say it's not very meaningful. But Agile is a loose frame. Some alternative number one, you put them in there. Alternative number two, I'm converting in also to Jira. You can put this as a checklist in Jira, right? You can put it as a comment in Jira. That's really up to you. I'm thinking about the task required by a single user story. And sometimes you just have, I don't know, a little note on Confluence or anywhere. And I've thought sometimes people, if it's a physical room, they just have a post-it. Just to, I don't know, clear their mind. You show up the next day, you finish on Friday. Maybe you drink too much with friends, you show up on Monday, you just want to be productive. You don't want to rethink everything. You just look at your task because you forgot where you left the work. Okay, so notes on Confluence, Jira, something. That's not so important. The one thing that I see is you are in a special phase at the beginning. What if it's not clear that it belongs to a user story? I'm going to jump to the next one to give you two variants that I see. I will call it the special case of the not for a specific story task, but it is not for a specific story. Where does it go? As I said, you can have, I would call it a task here. I will simply call it a placeholder on your backlog. And eventually you can put checklists if you want to do this. There's this possibility. Some other people maintain a to-do list on the side, which are either, for example, you can put it in Confluence, like, hey, we need to set up the machines. Okay, we got a Confluence page where everybody knows how to set up their machine and we got the list of the people who got to do it, all right? Or you could use, the time, wait, no, a to-do list. Yeah, or you can just use a note, a comment, anything. But there's also an alternative that I've seen working that I kind of love. Here's what I'm picky about not putting. I disrecommend for beginners in Agile to put placeholders task placeholders in the product backlog. The reason I am making that choice is because when you begin, people tend to always look at tasks. It takes a mental habit and gymnastic to understand, to look at things from a product point of view and write user story. And because it's the hardest habit to get, I want you to have it to be focused on that habit first. So first, I would say, try to only write user stories in your backlog. I like a process where I don't make exceptions. And that's why what's happening at the preparation of the project is just temporary. So I prefer to not mess up the system with a temporary thing. That's why I like the to-do list on the side. Although there is an alternative that I find a mix of both worlds. I do something that I will call the first user story. And exceptionally, I know that this first attempt, and on some web app, I just literally saw we're going to do a white page, but in the acceptance criteria with the definition we have, just to have a white page, we need to have Git. So in the checklist, we have install Git, get licenses, because not everybody had this. Basically, I got the task attached to that user story. And to me, that's my best recommendation. Even if it look a bit, it doesn't sound necessary. Every time you show up, I show up with something that I think is necessary technically. Even buying a new machine, I'm always trying to think, okay, I think I have to do this. Can I find a business outcome? Can I find an acceptance criteria that will make it different? For example, I know you're using it because you want to be able, when there's some bugs, you want to be able to keep your productivity. Okay, the business can understand that. It's good. You know your users don't want to expect random bugs. Okay, that's why you're using a testing system and a continuous integration, etc., etc., etc. So that's a bit of both. But I like to take a pretense like, hey, this is a first user story. We know to do it. It's going to take longer than usual because we have to set up all the configuration that we need. But maybe you will find that you don't need all the tasks for that user story. Maybe you can work without the licenses. You just have Git. You can work, as I say, we work without a continuous integration. And the virtue of having less tasks, so that's why I'm trying to get you on this, is the way to simplify things, the way of the simplicity, it's the art of getting less work done. Every time you got less work to do, you go faster and you increase the return on investment, the value you produce as a team. And that's why I like this. When we open something like a free-for-all, let's install stuff and put all the installation we want in the backlog, what I've seen before, first, it doesn't last just for a sprint. It tends to drag. And many things are not so useful. At least we're not focused because we're not looking at the outcome of why we want to have a machine, why we want to have Git, why we want to have SSH key set up properly. So I like that thinking that I see also from the greatest developers. So this time I'm picking it from software craftsmanship. Always understand there's a business or a project outcome behind everything you do technically. So these tasks, once you have your preparation, honestly, once you've been used to it and you have the reflex of putting out user story, you do whatever you want. I've seen different variants in different teams and they work. But if you start, my recommendation is do not put anything but user stories in the backlog.